leadership of the Board of Trustees. We have Congressman Cedric Richmond and Sanford Bishop, both proud alumni of this school, as well as Congressman Hank Johnson and one of my dear friends and a great inspiration to us all, the great John Lewis is here. We have your outstanding mayor, Mr. Kasim Reed, in the House. To all the members of the Morehouse family, and most of all, congratulations to this distinguished group of Morehouse men, the class of 2013. It's a little hard to follow. Not Dr. Wilson, but a skinny guy with a funny name. Tadella. He's going to be doing something. I also have to say that you all are going to get wet. I'd be out there with you if I could. But Secret Service gets nervous. So I'm going to have to stay here dry. But know that I'm there with you in spirit. Some of you are graduating summa cum laude. Some of you are graduating magna cum laude. I know some of you are just graduating thank you, Lord. That's appropriate because it's a Sunday. I see some moms and grandmas here, aunts, in their Sunday best, although they are upset about their hair getting messed up. Michelle would not be sitting in the rain. She has taught me about hair. I want to congratulate all of them, the parents, the grandparents, the brothers and sisters, the family and friends who supported these young men in so many ways. This is your day as well. Just think about it, your sons, your brothers, your nephews, they spent the last 4 years far from home and close to Spelman, and yet they are still here today. in troubled neighborhoods all across this country. Many of them heavily African American. Too few of our citizens have role models to guide them. Community just a couple of miles from my house in Chicago. Community just a couple of miles from here. There are places where jobs are still too scarce and wages are still too low. Where schools are underfunded and violence is pervasive. Where too many of our young men spend their youth not behind a desk in a classroom, but hanging out on the streets or brooding behind a jail cell. My job as president is to advocate for policies that generate one that your parents and grandparents could not even imagine. No one expects you to take a vow of poverty. But I will say it portrays a poverty of ambition. If all you think about is what goods you can buy instead of what good you can do. So yes, Dick, go get that law degree, but if you do, ask yourself if the only option is to defend the rich and the powerful, or if you can also find some time to defend the powerless. Sure, go get your MBA or start that business. We need black businesses out there, but ask yourself what broader purpose your business might serve in putting people back to work or transforming a neighborhood. The most successful CEOs I know didn't start out intent just on making money. Rather, they had a vision of how their product or service would change things, and the money followed. Some of you may be heading to medical school to become doctors. Make sure you heal folks in underserved communities who really need it too.
All right.
For generations, certain groups in this country, especially African Americans, have been desperate in need of access to quality, affordable health care. And as a society, we're finally beginning to change that.
Amen.
Those of you who are under age 26 already have the option to stay on your parents' health care plan. But all of you are heading into an economy where many young people expect not only to have multiple jobs, but multiple careers. So starting October 1st, because of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, you'll be able to shop for a quality, affordable plan that's yours and travels with you. A plan that will ensure not only your health, but your dreams if you are sick or go get an accident.
Yeah.
But we're going to need some doctors to make sure it works too.
Yeah, right.
We've got to make sure everybody has good health in this country. It's not just good for you, it's good for this country. So you're going to have to spread the word to your fellow young people.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second point. Just as Morehouse has taught you to expect more of yourselves, inspire those who look up to you to expect more of themselves. We know that too many young men in our community continue to make bad choices.
All right.
And I have to say, growing up, I made quite a few myself. Sometimes I wrote off my own failings as just as another example of the world trying to keep a black man down. I had a tendency sometimes to make excuses for me not doing the right thing. But one of the things that all of you have learned over the last 4 years is there's no longer any room for excuses.
All right. Yes.
I understand there's a common fraternity creed here at Morehouse. Excuses are tools of the incompetent used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments of nothingness. Well, we've got no time for excuses. Not because the bitter legacy of slavery and segregation have vanished entirely, they have not. Not because racism Booker T. Washington, Ralph Bunche and Langston Hughes, George Washington Carver, and Ralph Abernathy, and Thurgood Marshall, and yes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. These men were many things to many people, and they knew full well the role that racism played in their lives. But when it came to their own accomplishments and sense of purpose, they had no time for excuses. Every one of you have a grandma, an uncle, or a parent who's told you that at some point in life, as an African American, you have to work twice as hard as anyone else if you want to get by.
Amen.
I think President Mays put it even better. He said, whatever you do, strive to do it so well that no man living and no man dead and no man yet to be born can do it any better. And I promise you what was needed in Dr. May's time, that spirit of excellence and hard work and dedication and no excuses is needed now more than ever. If you think you can just get over in this economy just because you have a Morehouse degree, you're in for a rude awakening. But if you stay humble, if you keep hustling, if you keep on your grind and get other folks to do the same, nobody can stop you. And when I talk about pursuing excellence and setting an example, I'm not just talking about in your professional life. One of today's graduates, Frederick Anderson. Where's Frederick? Frederick, right here. I know it's raining, but I'm going to tell about Frederick.
All right. Okay.
Frederick started his college career in Ohio only to find out that his high school sweetheart back in Georgia was pregnant. So he came back and enrolled in Morehouse to be closer to her. Pretty soon, helping raise a newborn and working night shifts became too much. So he started taking business classes at a technical college instead, doing everything from delivering newspapers to bumping hospital floors to support his family. And then he enrolled at Morehouse a second time. But even with a job, he couldn't keep up with the cost of tuition. So after getting his degree from that technical school, this father of three decided to come back to Morehouse for a third time.
Yeah.
As Frederick says, God has a plan for my life.
Yeah.
And he's not done with me yet.
No.
And today Frederick is a family man, and a working man, and a Morehouse man. And that's what I'm asking all of you to do. Keep setting an example for what it means to be a man.
All right, Patrick.
Be the best husband to your wife,
Yes.
or your boyfriend, or your partner. Be the best father you can be to your children. If nothing's more important. I was raised by a heroic single mom, wonderful grandparents, made incredible sacrifices for me. And I know there are moms and grandparents here today who did the same thing for all of you. But I sure wish I had had a father who was not only present, but involved.
All right.
Didn't know my dad. So my whole life, I've tried to be for Michelle and my girls what my father was not for my mother and me. I want to break that cycle. Where a father's not at home. Where a father's not helping to raise that son or daughter. I want to be a better father, a better husband, a better man.
Yes.
It's hard work. It demands your constant attention and frequent sacrifice.
All right.
And I promise you, Michelle will tell you I'm not perfect. Michelle, she's got a long list of my imperfections. Even now, I'm still practicing, I'm still learning, still getting corrected in terms of how to be a fine husband and a good father.
That's right.
But I will tell you this, everything else is unfulfilled if we fail at family.
Yeah.
If we fail at that responsibility.
Yes.
I know that when I am on my deathbed someday, I will not be thinking about
All right.
Just be a good role model. Set a good example for that young brother coming.
All right.
If you know somebody who's not on point, go back and bring that brother along.
Yeah.
Those who've been left behind, who haven't had the same opportunities we had, they need to hear from you. You got to be engaged on the barber shop, on the basketball court, at church. Spend time and energy and presence there to give people opportunities and a chance. Pull them up, expose them,
All right.
support their dreams. Don't put them down. We got to teach them just like what we have to learn, what it means to be a man,
Right.
to serve your city like Mayor Jackson,
Yes.
to shape the culture like Spike Lee,
All right.
to be like Chester Davenport, one of the first people to integrate the University of Georgia Law School. When he got there, nobody would sit next to him in class, but Chester didn't mind. Later on, he said it was the right thing for me to do. Someone needed to be the first, and today Chester is here celebrating his 50th reunion. Where's Chester Davenport? He's here. So if you have role models, fathers, brothers like that, thank them today.
Yes.
And if you haven't, commit yourself to being that man for somebody else. And finally, as you do these things, do them not just for yourself, but don't even do them just for the African American community.
All right.
I want you to set your sights higher. You know, at the turn of the last century, W.E.B. Du Bois spoke about the talented 10, a class of highly educated, socially conscious leaders in the black community. But it's not just the African American community that needs you. The country needs you.
All right.
The world needs you.
Yes.
As Morehouse men, many of you know what it's like to be an outsider. Know what it's like to be marginalized. Know what it's like to feel the sting of discrimination. And that's an experience that a lot of Americans share. Hispanic Americans know that feeling when somebody asks them where they come from or tells them to go back. Gay and lesbian Americans feel it when a stranger passes judgment on their parenting skills or the love that they share. Muslim Americans feel it when they're stared at with suspicion because of their faith. Any woman who knows the injustice of earning less pay for doing the same work, she knows what it's like to be on the outside looking in. So your experiences give you special insight that today's leaders need. If you tap into that experience, it should endow you with empathy. The understanding of what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. To see through their eyes. To know what it's like when you're not born on third base, thinking you hit a triple. It should give you the ability to connect. It should give you a sense of compassion and what it means to overcome barriers. And I will tell you, class of 2013, whatever success I have achieved, whatever positions of leadership I have